On the 4th of March, the House of Keys will choose 4 people to become members of the Legislative Council. Prior to that vote, Agenda will be speaking to all the candidates so that you can find out more about the people that want to be national politicians. We hear this week from dyslexia campaigner Julia Bell, who is hoping to grab one of the LegCo seats.
I'm actually a mum. I've got 2 children. I am in my late 30s, so approaching 40 in a couple of years' time. And my background really is mental health. So I'm a mental health professional. I qualified as a mental health nurse, and I've been working, my favourite place to work as a nurse is in the community. I've worked for older persons mental health services, so specialising largely in dementia care, but also, anxiety disorders and depression too. And I wanted to be more efficient at what I did, so I decided to train to become a cognitive behavioural therapist, doing a postgraduate diploma in high intensity cognitive behavioural therapy. I did that whilst working full time, and now I work as a cognitive behavioural therapy for adults with mild to moderately severe common mental health disorders, working at a much more efficient way compared to what I was. And I'm really passionate about helping people, individuals and communities, and making a difference. That's really my reason for waking up in the morning.
So then I suppose in terms of who you are, outside of work.
Outside of work.
What do you do?
Okay, so outside of work, to be honest, right now I'm struggling to have to fit in lots of hobbies and interests, because so much of my time for the last 4 years has been put into dyslexia and trying to improve dyslexia in education and additional educational needs more broadly. I've been doing, I did 2 petitions over a period of 4 years. I had to read a lot of information in order to do those petitions, because I didn't just simply state my opinion or state my experiences. I wanted to back up that my experiences were actually based on evidence and what the literature is saying, not just locally, but nationally and internationally too. And I wanted to demonstrate that I'm not the only one on the Isle of Man, that this is a much wider problem. So that's taken up so much of my time to a point where I got the public involved. I created the group. We meet regularly.
And the group is?
Dyslexia Advocacy Group IOM. We meet at the family library, who've been fantastic to us. They've actually given us that space free of charge when they would normally pay a charge for that service, but they've given it to us for free, that space. And we've used that time to be really productive. I've set agendas. I've been really quite strict with the agenda and sticking to that, just like I do with cognitive behavioural therapy, so that we can stay focused, so it doesn't turn into a talking shop. And from that, we've got somewhere. We've now got that select committee established, and I did a presentation to Tynwald in Barul Suite, which was about 20 minutes in length, which also included a 5-minute video of what the public had to say to, again, demonstrate it wasn't just me. And I had a few people from Dyslexia Advocacy Group with me, again, as a visual to demonstrate, we're doing this collectively. I might be the speaker, but we've got a group of us who are all, cheerleading the same message. And so that has taken so much of my time. And then when I haven't been doing that, I'm a mum. So I've been, obviously, raising my children, fighting my daughter's corner when it comes to school. And when I have got spare time, I love keeping fit. That I suppose that's my time, is keeping fit, running, doing yoga. I love mindfulness and meditation. I do it because I'm so passionate about mental health. I don't want to be sharing all these skills and techniques to patients on how to improve their own mental health if I can't do it myself. So yeah.
And campaigning for anything is a really, well, it's a rewarding thing to do. It's a very informative thing to do, because I guess most people listening to this program won't have been that involved in politics in any particular way. They may have views on a whole range of different issues, but actually getting that depth of knowledge that you really need to be successful as a campaigner for a particular issue. Even as you mentioned there, putting a petition forward, that's not just as simple as making up an idea and saying, oh yes, well we want more services to help people with dyslexia. You've got to actually be able to demonstrate through your petition that the petition is worthy of somebody picking it up at some point in the future, and that's quite an exercise of an important exercise to go through. To be you've got to be quite rigorous and perhaps even ruthless in terms of assessing your cause.
Yeah, I actually didn't know anything about dyslexia. Maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I didn't know anything about it. I was curious as to whether my daughter might have dyslexia. In fact, I was convinced that she did, which is why I've done what I have done. But I didn't know anything about it. I started from scratch, and I learned it all by myself from doing the reading and the research. And I haven't got any qualifications in dyslexia, and I've managed successfully to show a sound argument which has been successful without any qualifications. So it demonstrates that I have the ability to pick up a subject which I know nothing about, read it and understand it, and persist. So I have that self-belief and that self-efficacy, which is what you need, I think, to be part of LegCo.
And I suppose then we move on to that. Why LegCo? Why have you decided to put your name forward?
I said before that the reason I wake up in the morning is to make a difference to people's lives. And I genuinely do, and I love my job. However, I believe that I'm capable of doing more, so I want to start making a difference at a population level so that I can have a greater impact than what I'm doing now, and I will keep going until I reach what I think is my full potential. I think, that's it, I've reached my limit, I can't do any more, this is where I'll stay. And I haven't got there yet. I know that I can do more, and therefore I'm going to try and reach that goal.
And I suppose the obvious other question, particularly if you've expressed an interest in LegCo, you've never been a member of the House of Keys before. Is that something you've thought about? Or
I have thought about that. For probably the last 5 years, my family and friends have all been saying I should really consider standing for Keys. That's actually something that they have been saying. However, I do think my skill set could meet either or, and my reason for going for LegCo now is that an opportunity has arisen. I was encouraged to by a couple of MHKs who thought that I have the skill set to do this. There's a member in LegCo now who agreed I have the skill set to do this too. And I thought there was a time when I didn't really understand what LegCo does, and I think that was the reason for kind of being more driven towards an MHK. But actually, I think I have a better understanding of what LegCo do now because I've spoken to a fair few of the LegCo members now to understand that better. And I was a little bit worried that being part of LegCo at one point in my life wouldn't be making that difference that I long for. But I think I was mistaken because, look at the domestic abuse bill that went through, look at, the assisted dying bill that's been made out of compassion. Look what's going through right now with the reproductive rights bill. Every single strategy that you look at quotes changes to legislation that is needed in order for the strategy to be successful. So I think I was wrong that, in my opinion, a few years ago, where you're not making as much of a difference being LegCo. So yeah, that's my reason. And
the things that you've learned, what would you say the LegCo members have taught you that has helped change that position?
So one member explained to me that I need to get used to everything being very slow, and when he first joined, he didn't realise how slow it was, and that if I expect to make changes really quickly, then I will be very disappointed. I think I already am aware of that simply because of, on the outside, trying to push dyslexia through. That's taken me 4 years to get to a stage of having a select committee, and there's still a long way to go with that, because even after the select committee make recommendations, there's no guarantee that there's going to be funding and budget in order to do that. So, I think I'm already very aware of how slow that process can be. I think someone also mentioned that it's a very different dynamic in terms of an ordinary workplace, where in a workplace maybe it's more cohesive and it feels more of a team. And you know, you would be a team with some aspects when I suppose when you are part of a select committee and being maybe a departmental member when you work as a team. But we are a set of individuals that collective set of individuals. So that was something to bear in mind, which I appreciated that feedback. I'm sure I've been given other feedback as well, but just perhaps not on the tip of my tongue.
And I suppose then, in terms of the big issues, what would you say? Well, in your life, what are the main issues apart from dyslexia?
Yeah.
What are the things that you see in the community in which you live, and in the workplace, the different places, the school perhaps, that you think need changing? There's
a lot of challenges, I think, at the moment. Obviously, you've got the budget of Manx Care at the moment as to whether they are overspending or not being given enough funds to meet their, you know, what they have to do, their mandate. So that's obviously been very big today in the news. You've got the housing crisis on the Isle of Man. You've got the ageing population, that we need to rebalance the ageing population and, you know, to try and increase economically active people, which will then reduce the dependency ratio. There's difficulty trying to get people to recruit, you know, from the UK or internationally to the Isle of Man because of, you know, the cost of living and housing, and prices of housing, the short supply of housing. So, you know, the infrastructure in terms of getting on and off the Isle of Man can be quite expensive and perhaps not so reliable as we would like, which is going to impact on small businesses, larger businesses, people moving over here. So there's a lot of challenges.
And how do you affect change? I mean, well, let's talk. Well, yeah, okay. You started off with the health budget. How do you resolve an issue where, on the one hand, we have an ageing population which is more reliant on health services? You have a health service which is becoming more capable of treating more and more things, so both in terms of the amount of people needing to use, or the amount of services required by just the growth in that age group of the population, as well as the growth in medicine. Mm-hmm. You have a much bigger amount of growth than you actually have in relation to the income that government has. So how do you resolve that?
Well, there has been the Sir Michelson's report. I don't know how far into it they are in terms of actually implementing that. I suppose that would be a start in terms of looking at that document and finding out what have we implemented so far and what haven't we, and really accelerating that plan. I know there is a drive to increase community care, to get out of the hospital, which costs so much money, into the community. I know that there's been an initiative where they have tried to make sure that 100% of the phone calls to, you know, ambulance services aren't always delivered, and that health professionals who are clinically trained to triage make that clinical decision as to whether an ambulance is justified or not. GP practices, rather than just working as a GP, you can work as a multidisciplinary team, especially for elderly and frailty patients, because, you know, polypharmacy can have an impact. And so rather than, you know, that revolving door of that patient keep coming back because their needs aren't quite being met and they have all sorts of, you know, different problems that a 10-minute appointment can't meet, it's about having that multidisciplinary team there in the GP practice, so that hopefully that patient's needs can be met in one longer appointment rather than having to have that revolving door. But yeah, I would say largely looking at that report.
And as a politician, you will be a national politician. I know there's some in the House of Keys who seem to think that LegCo's role should be limited to just scrutinising legislation. But you sit in Tynwald and you will be voting on big policy items. You'll be voting on financial items, and chances are you'll be a member of a department. How do you actually? I mean, you mentioned some of the potential solutions, but how do you get The different sides. So there will be some people who will say we need to spend whatever the health service needs to deliver the best possible healthcare service on the island. There'll be other people will say, well, we're not saying we don't think we should have the best possible healthcare, but that possible is the key word, and possible means you have to limit the budget, and in some way that has to be limited. So you've got two potentially competing views. How do you work with those different sides to find a solution that everyone can agree on?
Bottom line is, I don't think everyone is ever going to agree with. You're never going to get everyone to have consensus in such a big decision like this. I mean, obviously it's really important to have public engagement and have those consultations and different ways of engaging with the public, not just consultations, but perhaps, parliamentarians going into other people's spaces to ask for feedback, or the government conferences and the road shows and things like that to get an understanding what people are thinking. But I think it has to be based on what are the majority wanting, and also balancing it out with what is realistic, what is possibly feasible, making a separation between what's the wish list and what's actually fundamentally needed. And also thinking about the short-term consequences and the long-term consequences, and possibly favouring the long-term consequences over the short-term, for the sustainability of Manx care and the Isle of Man as a whole.
And of course, the easy thing in politics is to throw in sticks and stones at ministers and the like who have been appointed to make some of the more difficult decisions. You mentioned that it's important to go with the majority, but you do have a leadership role as well. So sometimes, I mean, the obvious thing, if you asked the public, do you want the best possible health service? They'll all say yes. Do you want to pay extra tax? They'll probably say no. Where do you go from there?
You're very right. This goes back to kind of being realistic and what is feasible, and sometimes making those very difficult decisions that won't be popular. For example, a very unpopular opinion and decision would be saying, well, maybe we can manage GP practices a little bit better by making them work more efficiently by, say, charging £10 for an appointment, because that way you're going to reduce DNAs, did not attend appointments, but that wouldn't be popular.
An immediate reaction, I guess, from most people listening to the programme would be, you can't go doing things like that. It's free at the point of delivery.
Absolutely, I completely,
But then, of course, it was free at the point of delivery at a time when we used to deliver an awful lot less. And there was possibly more money about. Subsequent to the Ukraine war and COVID, certainly our government and many of the governments in the countries that surround us have fallen upon quite difficult financial times, and it's not so easy to deliver everything that everyone wants.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Manx Care and Services just having to kind of deliver more and more and more with less each year because of the cost of inflation and staff's wages and so on, and the cost of medication and drugs. But the other way of thinking about it is that health and social care have now come together, because there's that link. While it used to be very separate, while the health side of it is free from the point of contact or access, whilst social care isn't. But if they're supposed to be joined up, then why are we saying that social care comes with this extraordinary cost and healthcare is completely free? So maybe, which I know what they're trying to do, is like social care, they're trying to find a different way of funding it, making that more sustainable and fair. But could you then balance that out with some health services having a cost at the expense of some social services being cheaper or free? And obviously, either way, you have to obviously protect the most vulnerable, Making sure that the people who are in poverty or close to poverty, are safeguarded so that they can access services even if they can't afford it, because otherwise, that's a determinant of health, isn't it? If income and healthcare services, you've got to protect that group. I'm never suggesting that, but it doesn't sit easy with me because I do really value free access to care, but it's just it just seems to be a bit of a crisis at the moment in terms of the funding. And when you do reach that point, you do have to think about whether something has to change. Otherwise, we're always going to be in this situation.
And the other thing that often people say needs to change is the situation where we have 24 members of the House of Keys, and in this case, we don't even get to find out who the candidates are potentially till the middle of February. Many people say that this is an archaic system, and you're a national politician, you should be voted in by the public. Do you think there's a place for that kind of reform for LegCo?
I think there is. My reason for thinking that is that if I rely on the MHKs to vote me in, does that jeopardise scrutiny at the highest level? I don't want to say this would affect me, because I do feel like I have integrity and honesty, and I stand by my values. But I think the risk is there. There is a risk that someone might not scrutinise to the highest ability because they know that they rely on MHKs to vote them in. And so if we were to open it up to the public to vote us in, then we would be able to scrutinise rigorously and thoroughly every single time for all members, because, and I'm not saying that that's not being done already, but I'm just saying that there is a risk that that this could happen. Then that it would safeguard against that. Yeah.
And I'm sure that all members of LegCo will say that they do scrutinise without fear or favour, but of course they have to bear in mind that they are looking for 13 votes from the members of the House of Keys, and if they are too rigorous and perhaps too vociferous in their scrutiny, maybe they'll put a few members off.
Yeah, I just think that there is a risk. I'm not suggesting that is being done or has been done. I just think there is a risk, and therefore to safeguard against that risk, if you opened it up to the public, it would prevent that from happening.
Well, we've got about 3 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes left to for you to tell us why you would make a really good candidate for the Legislative Council. Yeah,
okay. So, I think I'm really passionate. I have a lot of passion and get up and go, and I've got a really strong work ethic. I have shown that I'm able to have lots of different responsibilities all at the same time and be able to do very well with those competing demands. For example, studying whilst having a full-time job, whilst having children, whilst doing dyslexia advocacy group and doing well in that. I'm really efficient. I like to get things done efficiently, and that was my reason for doing my postgraduate diploma, so that I could see the same types of people but less sessions and get better results. I have determination and grit and tenacity and drive, and I am a really, I've got integrity, and I really like helping people is in my blood. So I've shown that by, when I was a child, I've always had that. When I was a child, I did beach cleans and raised money for charity. As an adult, I've gone to San Patriano, which is the world's leading drug and alcohol therapeutic community in the world, to find out what makes them successful. And I shared the outcomes of that to drug and alcohol services on the Isle of Man. I've taken children who are terminally ill to America as a dream holiday. So, I've shown consistently that I do good, and I'm really passionate about that, and I'd like to kind of put all of that into helping Manx residents on the Isle of Man.
And if you were to achieve one thing assuming you get elected to LegCo, if you were to achieve one thing, what would it be? What would the one thing that you'd really like to deliver?
When I was working as a mental health nurse in older persons mental health services, and I was advocating for carers to get a power of attorney set up just in case their loved one lost their kind of the capacity to make decisions. And then if that did happen and it became an enduring power of attorney, I quickly learnt that the carer only has responsibility over finances, while in England, I'm pretty sure that they have more of a say, not just in finances, but also in care and accommodation, which isn't the case on the Isle of Man. And I think there's a strong need to support carers better on the Isle of Man. There's a carer strategy going on, and with good reason, because if we can support carers, that will put less pressure on services on the Isle of Man. And so we need to give carers a bigger voice. So I think if we were to allow enduring power of attorney for carers to have make decisions in their best interest of the loved one, who knows that person the best, not just finances, but also in care and accommodation, that is something that I would love to see happen.
That was LegCo wannabe Julia Bell. Over the next few months, we hope to hear from all the LegCo candidates so you can make your own mind up. If you are standing, please get in touch with Phil Gorn at manxradio.com so we can arrange an interview. Let me know what you think and get in touch if you have any ideas for future shows. Don't forget there's programmes available as a podcast on Manx Radio's website. For now, I'm Phil Gorn. Thanks for listening.